it's Clarice, this is Clarice Reads, and today I'm just going to talk, I guess, about the books that I've been reading and the life that I've been living. But actually, after my last Reads and Rambles video, I didn't read much at all. For the 2 months that followed that, I ended up only finishing 2 books, both of which I had to read for class even, so I really wasn't reading for leisure at all. Because weirdly enough, I ended up taking the 2 only literature courses I need to take in all of college in my last term, which is right now. And the one where we're reading these 2 books for, the main theme was the ideal society. And I think it's interesting how in V for Vendetta, the ideal society that at least V there is aiming for is one of anarchy, while in Utopia by Thomas More, the ideal society is one of order and uniformity. So yeah, that's all that I read in the 2 months that followed my last Reads and Rambles video. However, over the last almost 2 weeks, I suddenly felt like reading and I managed to read 10 books. Yeah, I'm not a very consistent reader. A couple of weeks ago, I just suddenly felt like reading all the things again, which was terrible timing because school has been really stressful, but it was also perfect timing because the Booktube-a-thon happened. So 5 of those 10 books I actually read during the Booktube-a-thon. And it was a miracle that I managed to get so much read that week, given that that week I also had my thesis defense. But anyway, the first book that I finished in Booktube-a-thon was The Magician King by Grossman, which is the second book in the Magician series. Weirdly enough, the first book that I read in Booktube-a-thon last year was actually the first book in this series, The Magicians, and I also read most of it before the Booktube-a-thon. But anyway, I generally enjoyed this book. I like how we were able to explore the world or worlds even more in this book than we did in the first one. And I liked how here we don't just have the magic, but we're also trying to question where does this magic come from. In Booktube-a-thon, I also took advantage of the fact that I was subscribed to Marvel Unlimited. So I read some Marvel stuff. First, I started and finished Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, which is something that I'd been meaning to read for a while. And it was exactly what I expected it to be. It was just Deadpool killing everyone, and there was a lot of fourth wall breaking, which is one of the best parts of Deadpool. And it was a fun read! I also finished reading the reading order of House of M. I read 41 issues of House of M during the Booktube-a-thon. House of M is one of those big Marvel events that gets referenced a lot, at least in comics that I'd been reading, so I wanted to be able to read kind of the source material. The main premise of this is, right, generally in the Marvel universe, the mutants are kind of oppressed and discriminated against. But in the beginning of House of M, Scarlet Witch, Wanda, actually freaks out. And because of this, changes reality, alters it, so that we were in a world wherein the mutants were actually the ones above, and the humans, the regular humans, which here are called sapiens, were actually the ones that were discriminated against. And it's interesting because this change in the dynamic between the sapiens and the mutants changed a lot of other things that you wouldn't expect it to. For example, Luke Cage is actually the one who's in charge of the underworld, sort of. And also, Spider-Man is actually pretending that he's a mutant, pretending that he got his powers as a mutation and not from a spider bite. So overall, it was just really interesting, and I'm glad that I actually got to finally read this. The other 2 books that I read for Booktube-a-thon were actually, later on I realized, kind of similar. They were Project 17 by Eliza Victoria and Lockin by John Scalzi, both of which are set in the future with robots and things, and also involve a sort of mystery aspect, so they're both kind of sci-fi and mystery at the same time. Project 17 is actually a local book, so it's set in the Philippines, but of course, like I said, set in the future. And here there's a babysitter who actually took a babysitting job to watch over a 28-year-old grown man, because this man is actually suffering from schizoaffective disorder. But then she snoops around to try to figure out more about her employers, and then realizes that their past and their identities are kind of this big mystery. So she snoops even more, and stuff happens. Lockin, on the other hand, is about a future wherein there was this disease that actually affected a big bunch of the population, causing some people to not die but be locked in the sense that they no longer have control of their physical bodies. Like, their mental processes are still there, but they can't actually control their physical bodies. Aside from these people that are locked in, there are also some people who have jobs as integrators, which means that they're able to lend out their bodies to these people that are locked in for them to use. But what happens if an integrator is caught at the scene of a murder? And what if you don't actually know if it was the integrator or if someone was in control of that integrator's body. So both of these books I enjoyed a lot of aspects of, but found them also a little bit lacking. For Lockin especially, I really enjoyed the setting and the technology, but I found the plot kind of typical. They're both fun reads though, and I love futuristic sci-fi things in general. And I also like when sci-fi is able to explore the ethics of certain technologies, which we are able to see in both of these books. So those are all the things I read in Booktube-a-thon, but after that, since I had so much fun reading House of M and Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe, and since I was still subscribed to Marvel Unlimited, I just kind of went on a Marvel comic reading spree. I knew I wanted to read Infinity Gauntlet, but I love reading events with tie-ins, and Infinity Gauntlet didn't really have any. So I read some stuff pre-Infinity Gauntlet. The Silver Surfer issue showed us what kind of triggered all these events with Thanos, which was Death bringing Thanos back to life in order for Thanos to do this task, which was to basically kill half the universe for Death. And then Thanos' quest actually shows us how Thanos was able to get all the Infinity Gems, which he wanted to use to be able to do this task that Death gave to him. And then Infinity Gauntlet is how Thanos ends up using the gems and the new power that he got. I actually enjoyed this whole story as a whole much more than I expected to. I mean, I really enjoyed being introduced to new characters and concepts in the Marvel Universe, and of course the really epic cosmic battles. But my favorite part, which I actually won't shut up about to my friends, was Thanos' relationship with the Mistress of Death. More in the sense of just how Thanos was just getting constantly rejected by Death. I don't know, I just find it so funny because half the time he's just like, I want to kill everything. And the other half the time he's just like, I want to kill everything, but I'm doing it for you. Look at all the death that I'm causing. Don't you love it? Look, I'm doing it all for you. I love you so much. Why aren't you paying attention to me? Please talk to me. It's like Thanos is doing all this stuff and Death just continuously scene zoning him, or the equivalent of scene zoning him. Maybe I just have a weird sense of humor, but I found it funny and it made me see Thanos in a whole new light. The Thanos quest and Infinity Gauntlet stuff was actually written in the early 1990s, which is kind of ridiculous. But after I figured, why stop there? I'm gonna read older comics, so I decided to read the 1980s original Secret Wars comics. What I noticed is that older comics seem to have a lot more magic, or at least a lot of magic disguised as science, than the newer comics do. And this makes a lot of the things and a lot of the characters and their powers kind of absurd. But I was reading this and I was thinking, this is comics at its purest form. You can imagine just how much fun the writers were having just thinking of random stuff and putting it into comics and not needing to worry about whether the mainstream audience would like it. And I like modern comics, but it was just nice seeing a different kind of comic and seeing what older ones look like. Even though I know that 1980s isn't super old in terms of comics, it's the oldest I've read. The other two things that I managed to read in the last couple of weeks were actually Smaller and Smaller Circles, which I reread because I actually have to read this for another class. And even though this is my second time reading it, it didn't actually occur to me until the class discussion that crime fiction isn't really much of a thing in our country. And that's because crime in the Philippines isn't some fictional adventure. It's not something that's so different and unusual. It's everywhere. Crime is everywhere in the Philippines. So as a Filipino reader, reading crime fiction wouldn't really be an escape from reality, but instead kind of a reiteration of the reality that we already know about, which is kind of sad. Reading it the second time, I think I actually enjoyed it less than I did the first time. But that being said, I think I also appreciated its significance more, if that makes sense. And then yesterday night and this morning, in between like sessions of programming stuff for thesis, I started and finished reading Etiquette and Espionage by Gail Carriger, which is the first book in the Finishing School series. It's basically a series about a finishing school where finishing means not only learning about etiquette but also espionage, if you didn't get that from the title. It's a young adult steampunk series, it's a lot of fun, and it was kind of perfect for me to read in breaks between doing schoolwork, which mostly consisted of thesis. I've read a lot in the last 2 weeks, but the last 2 weeks have also actually been really stressful in terms of schoolwork. I feel like there are two types of readers. There are some people that like reading when they're kind of sad because they want to be able to escape, and there are other people that can only read when they're in a good mood. And for the most part, I can only read when I'm in a good mood. But there seems to be like a weird exception to that rule, because I also tend to read a lot when I'm really stressed out or bombarded with schoolwork or work in general. I'm not sure why that is, but now that I think about it, it's probably for the same reason that I also seem to get more sleep when I actually have way too much schoolwork to do. And that's because when I'm really stressed out and I have a lot of work to do, I kind of appreciate my free time and my me time and my sleeping time a lot more. It's like when I do a lot of work, I feel like, oh, I deserve to take this break to read. If I do a lot of work, I feel like I deserve to get 7.5 hours of sleep. I'm not sure if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. But next week's actually going to also be super stressful, which is expected because I only have 2 weeks left of college life. It's still weird to me that I'm going to be done with college soon, but I'm also so stressed out because all our subjects have a lot of requirements due next week and the week after, and I also have so many thesis revisions to work on with my group. So that's what I'm going to be focusing on for the next couple of weeks, and I'm probably also going to be reading a lot because stress. I think that's all I have to talk about. Before I go, I might as well tell you about what I'm currently reading, and that is The Pretenders by Sionil. I kind of have to finish this by today for class. But it's basically a local book set in the 1950s, and it comments a lot on Philippine society at the time. And this is actually a library copy, that's why it looks so old. And that's why I have to put post-its and I can't just write on it. But other than that, this week I'm probably also going to get to Curtsies and Conspiracies, which is the second book in the Finishing School series. Sometimes it's just nice to have a fun book to read. So hopefully that wasn't too long. Feel free to tell me about what you've been reading lately, or some of your thoughts on some of the things that I talked about in this video, because I feel like I talked about a lot of things. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time, which will likely be when I'm already done with school.